Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Rick Feinberg, the Editor-in-Chief of Sky and Telescope and the astronomical tour leader for this cruise. And I'm very happy. I haven't done anything yet. Thank you very much for joining us. On behalf of both Sky and Telescope and Travel Quest, I'd like to welcome you aboard. As you can see, we're having a little bit of roughness as we get started. There's 2 empty chairs here. At least one of them will be filled as soon as Paul Knappenberger can get himself down here. I don't know where Alan Dyer is, but I've heard he's on the ship somewhere. So we'll get him in here at some point. Took a few extra minutes. Paul, I see you. Come on down. Took a few extra minutes to get the video and the audio set up. So what I'd like to do this morning is just orient you to the program, what you can expect over the next couple of weeks. So if we can advance the first slide. Next slide, please. So I didn't learn how to say next slide in Italian, but I'm told that in the video booth you can advance this. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to show you a slide like this at the beginning of every day where we have a lecture program. And you'll see this information in your daily program displayed much more prominently than it was last night. All right? The reason that the room isn't filled to overflowing is that the announcement that we labored over for 45 minutes yesterday in the cruise director's office, ended up in a little box, so a lot of people didn't see it. The way things are going to work is that, although you can't tell by looking around, there's over 1,000 people in our group. And so this room doesn't hold that many. We're going to have to split it into 2. And in order to keep things simple, at least I hope it's simple, we're going to split it alphabetically. Basically, if your last name begins with A to K, you will come to one of the lectures. And if your last name begins with L to Z, you'll come to the other. Every program will be given twice. And if you really want to come to one of the programs instead of the other, and the room is full, you can go to the Sinfonia Lounge, which is 1 deck up, and everything will be simulcast, live broadcast on TV. Okay, next slide. As you've already discovered, there will be a Travel Quest hospitality desk right outside the entrance here to the theater on deck 6, and we'll staff it from about a half hour before the lecture programs begin to a half an hour after they're over, so that you'll have the opportunity to meet with the Travel Quest staff and get your questions answered about the logistics of your travel over the next 2 weeks. Before I go any further, what I'd like to do is introduce you to the most important person on the ship. This is not the captain, as much as he'd like to think so. It's not the cruise director. I apologize, Paolo. It's Pamela Moody from Travel Quest.
Thank you, everybody, for coming here. And we really, on behalf of Travel Quest, appreciate that you booked with us and continue to travel with us. And so many of you have been with us many times now. So Liza, many of you have either emailed or spoken with her. She sends her very best, and as does Aram. Aram is in Egypt right now with the tours underway. We also have groups in Libya. I'm happy to say that everybody, including Americans, have gained entry without problems, so that's good news. And then we have another group in Turkey that's going on as well. So all that's going good. I want to mention that most of you, or all of you, got these PDFs of your shore excursions, and you all should now have orange cruise tickets. If you don't have that, contact the shore excursion desk. And to let you know too, that all of the shore excursions are an MSC product. So even though we may know about them because we're booked on them ourselves, they're an MSC product, and if you have specific questions, go to the shore excursion desk for that. So that's pretty much everything. Oh, t-shirts. For the international travelers or non-US Canadian travelers, we have your t-shirts and viewers, the pin, all packaged up, and we are going to have those delivered to your cabin, perhaps while we're on the shore excursion this afternoon. And if you have contacted Travel Quest, about getting a different size or your shirt's damaged, then we'll take care of that after all of the international travelers have their packets. Likewise with the pins, we kind of stressed their importance at one point because we were going to use them as admission to these lectures, but because of the logistics, that didn't work out. So we're doing it with this alphabetical thing instead. So I'll be outside after the lectures, and then if you have any other questions about your T-shirts or other packets, then let me know. Yeah.
Do we have to exchange the tour vouchers for orange tickets at the exchange?
Not for Naples, right, but for everything else.
My understanding was that they're going to do that.
I thought it was just for Naples. Yeah, we only got Naples. Okay.
Yeah. I think
Okay, I think there's a little confusion. We're not sure yet whether we're going to get the rest of them delivered or whether we're going to have to go make the exchange. But in the meantime, if you're on the Naples excursion, you got your orange ticket in your cabin. If for any reason you didn't and you think you're on the Naples excursion, go to the shore excursion desk with your voucher. Okay?
And we'll find out the question if they're going to, or the answer, if they're going to deliver these like they did last night or handle it another way. We can announce that later.
All right, thanks very much, Pamela. You don't need to wear the pins, but you should wear the pin during the eclipse, because that way, well, first of all, the eclipse gods do appreciate the pins. And the second reason is that when you go home and you show this nifty souvenir, you want to say, I was wearing it during the eclipse. All right, next slide, please. This answers the question, why are we here? All right, why are we here? We're here to see a total eclipse of the sun. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the eclipse this morning. I'll do that in a couple of days. But I would like to get to know you a little better. And it's always interesting for a cruise ship full of eclipse chasers to have a sense of who else is on board. So I'd like to go through some questions, some simple questions. If we can have the next slide. Okay, how many of you here are here specifically because of the eclipse? Okay, that makes sense. How many of you are here primarily because you wanted to take a cruise and the eclipse is just an extra? Well, there's a few. Okay, there's a few. All right. You'll answer the question differently next time. Next is, for how many of you, even if you've been to eclipses before, how many of you are taking your very first cruise? That's great. That's great. In my experience, what happens is people who like to cruise, once they have seen an eclipse, they become eclipse chasers. And people who like to chase eclipses, once they've taken a cruise, they start to like to cruise because both experiences are really a lot of fun. Next slide. Can't quite see it. It says, how many of you are eclipse virgins? How many of you are seeing your very first eclipse and will be collectively losing your eclipse virginity on board these next 2 weeks? That's great. Well, congratulations. You're really in for a treat. Next slide. This is one that always puzzles people. How many of you are not sure, not quite sure, if you've seen a total eclipse of the sun? Be honest. There's a few hands. There's a few hands. Okay, actually, guys, you need to stand up and move aside for a second because it's important that they see the next question because they may misunderstand me. If I can have the next slide. Steve, get out of the way. This is especially important for those of you who are not sure if you saw an eclipse. I need to know if you're not sure whether you've had sex, because the two questions are very, very similar. If you can't answer absolutely, positively yes, with complete conviction, then the answer is no. All right? All right, let me have the next slide. The difference between having had sex or not having had sex, the difference between having seen a total eclipse of the sun and having seen maybe a partial or even a deep partial, even an annular, is like the difference between night and day. It really is. And for those of you who have not seen a total eclipse before, you will only understand this after you have experienced your first. As Just like with sex, you always remember your first, right? But because I don't want you to have to wait a whole week to try to understand what it is I'm saying, I'd like to show you a video clip. So if we can have the lights down on the stage, please. Turn off the lights on me so that we can you please turn off the spot? Put me in the dark? Well, good, excellent, thank you. All right, the next slide. And I need you to make the microphone next to the computer so we can hear the audio. We need to hear the sound. Audio. Go back one slide, please. Can you go back one slide? Yes. Go back one slide. Okay, I'll tell you what. Do you have sound? No. I'm going to go to the booth. The video's no good without audio. Can you put the microphone down on the computer? Oh, okay.
Moving video filter.
Oh, Corona!
25 seconds.
Diamond
There's the Corona.
I see bees! Oh, I see many bees! Oh, I see the Corona, my God, look at that! Oh. Woo! Diamond green! Oh, I see the flash spectrum! Look, there's Jupiter, there's Mercury.
500.
One at 3 o'clock.
68.
One at 10 o'clock.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Check out the video.
Oh my God.
Check out the video. Oh, the video is super. Let's pull back on the video a little bit. Pull back. Naked eye. Oh my God, look at the streamers! Jesus Christ! Oh, God! I'm just looking at it with the naked eye. I can't believe it!
Look at this! Look at the sky all around! Oh, look at
Couple of wide angles.
My God, I had no idea it was going to be
Couple of wide angles.
That was from my first eclipse. That was from July 1991 in Baja. Steve, did you recognize the voice? No, it was Fred Espenak, NASA eclipse guru Fred Espenak. The thing that's amazing is that was like his 15th totality. What's more amazing is that all the sound that you heard came from 3 of us. 3 guys, okay? And I was the only eclipse virgin at the time, and I wasn't the loudest and making the most noise. But that's what a total solar eclipse can do, even to people who've seen a dozen of them or more. All right, so if you've never seen one, you're really in for quite a treat. I do like to find out how many eclipses people have seen. It's always nice to identify who has seen the most on board a ship. So I'd like everybody to stand up, please. Everybody stand up. All right, now those of you who have not yet seen a total eclipse, please sit down. All right? Those of you who have only seen one total eclipse, please sit down. Those of you who have seen 2, please sit down. I don't want to spend all day doing this, so let's skip ahead. Those of you who've seen 5, but no more than 5, sit down. Okay, let's take a risk here. Those of you who have seen 10, but no more than 10 already, please sit down. Okay, we still have a few. Are you standing because you're standing or because you don't have a seat? Let's see, is there anybody left standing other than Steve here? Technically I should be sitting because I've only seen 5. Yeah, all right. Is there any? Okay, Steve, how many have you seen? About 12. Okay, good. How many times have you had sex? Yeah. He said not quite 12. Okay. Next slide. All right, well, if we're lucky, if you're all wearing your pins and the Eclipse gods are happy, you will see one more after this cruise, and next time we go through this exercise, you'll stand up longer. All right, now, we are going to be observing the eclipse right around here in Libya, just over the border from Egypt. And as you can see from the slide, the chances of clear skies on eclipse day, climatologically speaking, are 60 to 70%, which is really good. That's probably the highest. Now, Baja was higher for me, but it's a very high percentage for an eclipse site. But as the saying goes, climate is what you expect, weather is what you get. And we don't know what the weather itself will be like on eclipse day, but we will track it as carefully as we can and try to keep you updated. There's a really, really good chance that we will see totality. And as I'll explain in my next presentation in a couple of days, there's a lot more to experience in totality than just seeing the corona. So even if we don't get a perfect view, and I've seen a couple of eclipses that weren't perfect, you still get a lot of excitement and a lot of enjoyment. All right, what I'd like to do, I think next, if we have the next slide, is go through the program a little bit, tell you what you can expect. You should have all gotten your Eclipse source book, and again, if you booked through TravelQuest but live outside North America, you'll be getting your packet with your source book probably today in your cabin. In addition to I'd like to encourage you all, or maybe I should, in the spirit of asking questions, I should ask another question. And you have to answer this honestly, okay? How many of you have read the source book? Very good, very good. I won't ask you how many of you have not. There's a lot of really good information in here. I know because most of it came from Sky and Telescope, and we don't get things wrong, although I did notice there were a few typos. The source book has lots of information about observing the eclipse, photographing the eclipse, experiencing the eclipse, and that's why we gave it to you. In addition, we have supplied everybody with an Eclipse viewer. Again, if you're an international passenger, you will be getting that in your packet. And these Eclipse viewers are safe for naked eye observing of the partial phases. And I will say it now, and I'll say it again in my presentation, and I'll say it again out in the Libyan desert. You don't wear these during totality, all right? If you're a first timer and you see that these are Eclipse glasses and you wear these through the entire eclipse, you'll wonder, why is everybody screaming? Because you won't see anything, all right? These are for the partial phases, and I'll explain how to use them later. Next slide just shows a happy eclipse chaser wearing Sky and Telescope eclipse shades, and in the next slide, I think, if I remember correctly, we get started. Next slide, please. Yes, describing the program. Now, Alan, have you made it? No, Alan didn't make it. Well, it's a good thing I have a picture of Alan Dyer here. I'm going to introduce my staff, my illustrious astronomical staff. This gentleman is Alan Dyer. He's a contributing editor of Sky and Telescope, and he is a longtime planetarian who works at the Calgary Science Center. And he is our eclipse photography guru. He's done it many times. He's done it with film, video, and now digital. And he'll be able to answer all your questions about astrophotography, and I encourage you to ask him, but not all at once. Next slide will show his presentations that he'll be giving. And again, the exact times of these presentations will be published in the daily program. Alan and I will both be introducing the mechanics of observing and photographing the eclipse, and his part of it is how to record the eclipse in images and video. And then later in the cruise, after the eclipse, he's going to give a really phenomenally exciting presentation called The Amazing Sky, Celestial Wonders You Can See and Photograph Yourself. One of the best parts of that presentation is the movies and animations that Alan has put together. He has spent a lot of time under dark skies recording high-resolution images and creating video time-lapse images of them. And you will see the night sky as you have never seen it before. Next up is Steve Marin from the American Astronomical Society. And on the next slide is the title of his presentation, Great Discoveries in Space Science. And I will ask Steve to stand up You have a mic, and tell us in a few words what your presentation will entail.
Basically the universe.
Can you be more specific?
I had the original impression I was going to give 3 talks, and since it boiled down to you give 1 talk twice for different people who are late or in the other dining room sitting, I've given a kind of a planned, a broad brush approach, starting out with some of the most recent discoveries in the solar system, from the Cassini mission visiting Saturn and its moons, and the Stardust mission that's just returned some very exciting and interesting samples from the comet Wild. In America we call comet Wild. And then I'm going to go on through some information about the more than 150, I think more than 170 planets of other stars that have been found in the last 11 years, and go on through galaxies. A lot about, takes almost as long to describe it as a lot about the Hubble telescope and the Spitzer Space Telescope, what they're finding, and particularly for the people who haven't looked into astronomy before, some explanations of what these pictures mean and whether to believe them, and the colors and everything else, and end up with the latest on the first trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, from the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, the WMAP satellite, which is one of NASA's greatest achievements.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Next slide, please. This is Paul Knappenberger from the Adler Planetarium and Astronomy Museum. It's nice to meet you, Paul. We've never actually met face-to-face before. Glad you made it.
Thanks for the
nervous
shirt.
there. Next slide gives the titles of Paul's presentations. The first, Introducing the Universe from the Solar System to the Edge of Space and Time. And then I've noticed there are quite a few kids on board, and some parents have already asked me, will we have any presentation specifically for the kids? And the answer is yes. Paul and his wife Naomi will be giving a presentation the day before the eclipse. And again, as always, the exact time and place will be in the daily program. Paul, would you like to give us a little introduction to your introduction?
Thank you. I'm going to take you on a photographic tour from the Earth out through the solar system, the galaxy, and the universe of galaxies. I've asked a couple of the astronomers on our staff back at the Adler to pull the most beautiful celestial photographs that they've seen from any sources and put them together. And so it'll be less of a science tour, I think, than Steve described, and more of a beautiful photography tour for this first one. And then the second one, we've brought along some activities that are age appropriate, and are looking forward to meeting all the kids that are aboard and helping them prepare for their own eclipse experience. And then hopefully with a little bit of time after the eclipse, we'll have each of the kids that participated make their own t-shirt with their own eclipse design on it that they can wear for the last day of the cruise.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Now, how many of you were with us in the South Pacific last April? A handful. And for those of you who were with us last year, you're looking at this other character up here and saying, God, that looks a lot like that guy who lectured with Rick in the South Pacific last year. Looks a lot like him. Yeah, actually the resemblance is amazing. For those of you who've read the source book and said, wait a minute, there were only 4 people listed, you're wondering, since I've already mentioned Alan Dyer, why is there a 5th? Well, Ed Krupp is far from the 5th wheel, okay? I asked Ed at the end of the last cruise if he could join me for this one, and he said no, because he was in the middle of a major reconstruction and renovation of Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. So I was disappointed. But then it turned out that, as with all big projects, and Steve, who's worked at NASA for 35 years, can tell you, there's always unforeseen delays. Even little projects like getting a lecture started at 9 o'clock, you can have unforeseen delays. And so the Los Angeles public's misfortune in having to wait a few extra months for the reopening of Griffith Observatory is our very good fortune, because Ed Krupp was able to join us after all. Unfortunately, after I printed the source book. So next slide is Ed in one of his famous astronomical ties. He's always got an astronomical tie on, except when I've asked him to wear a t-shirt. Ed will give us 2 presentations on board the cruise. Most of you know that Ed is a very accomplished and renowned archaeoastronomer, and we are going to some of the most renowned archaeoastronomical areas on the planet. And so in the next slide, you will see the titles of Ed's talks, 2 of them, one about Egyptian astronomy and one about Roman astronomy. Ed, why don't you give us a little preview?
Thanks very much, Rick, and also thank you for inviting me. It's a delight to be here. And one of the great...
Ed, I think your mic may not be on. Why don't you trade them?
Right. How's that? Oh, that's better. Ooh. No, thank you very much, Rick. I do appreciate the sort of the last-minute chance to join all of you. The pleasure of being at the heart of a $93 million renovation of Griffith Observatory and expansion is that it doesn't matter when it's done. It is on time and on budget. So the 2 programs, Under Nile Skies, Under Roman Skies, obviously deal with destinations on this cruise. Nile Skies naturally being Egypt, and a number of you will be visiting the pyramids, perhaps the Cairo Museum, or out to Saqqara, where, in fact, the first pyramid is located by the Pharaoh Zoser. But I'll be doing in Under Nile Skies a survey of ancient Egyptian astronomy and the heritage that we still possess from ancient Egypt. And then because the pyramids are part of this cruise, and because the pyramids are part of the imaginations of all of us now, I'll spend a particular amount of time on the pyramids, on the Great Pyramid, and on the specious argument that the 3 pyramids at Giza represent the 3 stars in the belt of Orion. And so you will see, if you have been misled by this argument, how you have been standing on your head. Under Roman Skies, obviously about astronomy in ancient Rome, which is basically astronomy in ancient Greece, just updated a little bit with a bigger empire. But we have several destinations that have high Roman influence, not the least of which there is one today, for those of you going to Pompeii. I'll be covering some aspects, examples of things, the intersection between culture and astronomy at Pompeii, in Rome, and at Lepsus Magna. Of course, the site in Libya, magnificent Roman ruins. But today, since I don't really have a chance to talk in depth before those of you who visit Pompeii do so today, let me simply draw your attention when you're at the site to the Temple of Apollo. The guides should be taking you there, but they might not take you there. It's right on the main route into Pompeii, and there is, in fact, an astronomical artifact in the precinct of the Temple of Apollo. It is a public sundial. And it's just sitting right there. You can't miss it. It's on a pillar. And so if you want to see your astronomy at Pompeii, stick your head in the Temple of Apollo, take a look at the sundial. In fact, we are using that spot in one of the exhibits that's coming into Griffith Observatory. A little thing with the Pepper's Ghost where a couple of Romans come in, check the time, say, we'll meet you later, just check the sundial. So that's what's happening for you at Pompeii today. And in fact, check the sundial so you don't miss the bus back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. All right, and as if that weren't enough, already having one more lecturer than we originally planned, we actually have 2. Next slide, please. Have you noticed that there is a lot of Italian on board? You hear it a lot, but you don't hear it just from the crew. You also hear it from a lot of the passengers. There's 1,000 of us, but there's about 400 or 500 Italian amateur astronomers on board. And one of the people that they brought along to lecture to them is Franco Pacini, the gentleman on the right, in case you weren't sure which one I was referring to. Franco is the former director of Arcetri Observatory in Florence, Italy, overlooking the beautiful city of Florence. And I'm here with him at the June transit of Venus in 2004, because Franco invited us to observe the transit from the rooftop at Arcetri. And it's funny, I had never met him up to that point, but since then we've rendezvoused several times. And we're going to do so again this evening because he's boarding the ship today in Naples and will be sailing with his Italian compatriots throughout the rest of the cruise. And because Franco speaks English, he's agreed to make a presentation to our group. And on the next slide is the title of that presentation, The Quest for Bigger Eyes, from Galileo to the Large Binocular Telescope and Beyond. Franco is one of the astronomers involved with the construction of what will soon be the largest binoculars in the world. The Large Binocular Telescope is two 8-meter telescopes, 25-foot telescopes, on a common mount. It's being built on Mount Graham in Arizona, and Franco is one of the principal astronomical architects of the project, and he'll give us some perspective on where that project fits in, not just in modern astronomy, why are we building this particular telescope now, but also how it fits in the history of astronomy, and in particular telescopic astronomy, and what we might anticipate in the future as telescopes continue to get bigger and more phenomenally powerful. And the next slide. Finally, I'm going to give a couple of talks myself. All right, this is a picture of me at the South Pole. The relevance will become clear in a moment. Next slide. The second of my 2 presentations later in the cruise will be about my recent Antarctic expedition. More importantly, how you can do it yourself if you happen to have, an extra few tens of grand lying around and a few weeks to spare and don't mind taking off and not knowing if you'll ever come home. But before that, before the eclipse, paired with Alan Dyer, I'm going to be describing how to experience the eclipse. And I always like to draw attention to the word experience, because you don't just observe an eclipse. You don't just watch it. You don't photograph an eclipse. You don't look. You see it, you feel it in the way the temperature changes, in the way the wind sometimes changes. You hear it, certainly, as you heard it on the video. You can also feel it in the sense of you have often the wind picking up. We'll be in the desert. You could potentially feel the sand, the way the sand is blowing, potentially changing. We're not likely to hear many animals or anything like that. The only sense I haven't been able to apply in experiencing an eclipse is the sense of taste. But I think I may even have a solution to that one, as I'll explain in my talk. And so, those will be my 2 presentations. Next slide. If you have read your source book, you'll see an article in there about the green flash. And that will explain why every day around sunset, you'll see people start to mosey on out to deck, always facing the sunset. And they're not doing that to look at the pretty clouds or to just enjoy watching the sun go down. They're doing that because they want to see the green flash, which is a really beautiful phenomenon that you're not going to see at every sunset, but you have a really good chance of seeing on a clear sunset at sea. And so every afternoon I do encourage you to go out on the deck. The sunset times are always published in the daily program, and you will find lots of other people out there watching for the green flash. Bring your cameras, bring your binoculars, and if you don't know exactly what it is you're supposed to be looking for, someone will be able to tell you. I've had several inquiries already about whether we'll be able to do any stargazing. The answer is we're supposed to be able to do some stargazing, but I haven't yet had a chance to meet with the captain to make the arrangements. There are a few spaces up in the upper decks that would be appropriate venues for stargazing with the lights out, but lights out on a cruise ship is always a safety issue, and I have to negotiate that with the captain. In the meantime, if you're joining us in the desert overnight, there's a fair number of you that are going to be traveling into Libya overnight before the eclipse. We will definitely do some stargazing there, assuming that it's clear. Yes?
One of the questions I had learned about the site was how everything lighted up. Was it going to be no lights, or was it going to be like a parking lot?
Yeah, the question is, how brightly lit will the eclipse site be? We're going to be in Libya, so the answer is I have no idea. All right? But I also know that there will be a lot of desert around. And so if you don't like it here, you can go over here, at least if they'll let us. All right? Perhaps this is a good time to point out that there are a lot of unknowns. The ship is docking at Tobruk for the first time. Okay? MSC has never sent a ship into Tobruk, Libya. It's been to Tripoli before. But it was very encouraging to hear from Pamela that our land tour to Libya successfully got in, so we don't anticipate any problems in terms of being able to go into the country. But exactly what will happen once we get there, You know, we've got lots of good plans, but we don't know all the answers. So we're just going to have to be a little bit loose about it. The only thing I know for sure is that the eclipse will happen at the appointed time and place. And we're going to do everything we can to put you in that place at that time, short of actually getting the ship up out of the water and bringing it into the desert. All right, though I've heard that something like that has happened before in this region. Okay, next slide. All right, just in case the daily program once again publishes the astronomical schedule in 3-point type, I figured I would show you in very large type, brightly colored, what the next astronomical program will be. And that will be in 2 days, because see, today we're in Naples and Pompeii, and tomorrow we're in Syracuse. On Saturday, we have a whole day at sea. So there will be programming in the morning and programming in the afternoon. And only Saturday, we're going to ask you to put up with us for 2 hours straight, except for having a break in the middle there. Normally, we're going to say, come to the 9 o'clock or the 9:30, or come to the 11 o'clock. Okay, that's how we're normally going to do it. But for Saturday only, we're going to ask you to come either in the morning or in the afternoon and stay with us the whole morning or the whole afternoon, because Alan's talk on imaging and my talk on experiencing the eclipse have a lot of overlap and interplay, and it'll be really helpful for you if you hear all of it at once and have a chance to ask us both questions at the same time. So, Saturday in the morning for the first half of the alphabet, in the afternoon for the last half of the alphabet, we're going to introduce you to Eclipse 06, all about experiencing it with all your senses and recording it for posterity. Next slide, I think, is the last slide, but I may be wrong. Next slide. Yes, the last slide. Just a nice mood-setting reminder, again, of why we're all here. For those of you who have not yet seen an eclipse, this is a diamond ring. You'll hear the phrase a lot. It's something that you see at both the beginning and the end of totality. It's spectacularly beautiful. And if you have never given your beloved a diamond ring, you can say that you did after you've experienced a total eclipse. You and all the other hundreds and hundreds of us out in the desert. So with that, we'll conclude the welcome and the introduction, and we look forward to seeing you on Saturday and running into you all at the hospitality desk, which will be open for another half hour, and thank you very much.